Major funding for this production is provided by American Bank of Lafayette, the financial choice of the 80s. Additional funding provided by the Friends of LPB.
When I was a kid growing up in Lafayette, our civics class at Lafayette High visited the state capitol in Baton Rouge. Well, the first thing we wanted to see was a statue of Huey Long. There was an old man sitting there, and he had written an epic poem about Huey Long. And I was a kid, but it made such an impression on me. I remember how it started. It said, "Gather round me, children, and I'll sing to you a song. I'll tell you of the doings of a man named Huey Long." Well, to tell us about the doings of a man named Huey Long, the all-time Louisiana legend, is a legend in his own right, the distinguished United States Senator from Louisiana, the son of Huey Pierce Long, Senator Russell Long. Hello, Senator. Good to have you with us.
Thank you so much.
Senator, it was 1918, and a couple of days after you were born, on what might be called not the affluent side of the tracks in Shreveport, your father, then aged 25, was elected railroad commissioner, and life was never the same for Russell or any other Long from that moment on, I gather.
Well, I never knew what it was not to be in politics. Gus, I did nothing about politics, of course, when I was very small, but my father was always very much involved in things, as far back as I can recall, and he was always running for office. Result was that I didn't see as much of him as I'd like to have seen of my father. He's a very, very busy person. But I did learn something about campaigning. The time I was big enough to lick an envelope, I was helping to mail out campaign literature and stuff like that for my father. And so it was just my life. I've lived it that way all my life.
Senator, having your father as a young child in politics, which is the most volatile of all occupations, it's war, almost full-time. Were there fights with other kids? Did people say things about him, and you got a black eye? Did you have to defend yourself and your dad and son when you were a kid?
Well, fortunately, it never was a matter of fisticuffs. When I was born, as you indicated, I was born on Laurel Street in Shreveport. That was a working man's neighborhood. It's a low-income neighborhood. We lived within about one block of those Kansas City railroad switching yards. We'd hear that old Kansas City switch engine move those trains up and down day and night. And when I moved away from that neighborhood, I had difficulty sleeping at night, first because it was so quiet. You didn't hear the railroad trains operating up and down. That's right. The streetcar would pass over the viaduct over the railroad tracks just about a block and a half from us, so you'd know it was coming because you'd hear it a block and a half before it got there, crossing over the viaduct. My father first attracted attention up there by opposing an increase in the streetcar fare. Before he ever got elected to public office, they raised the streetcar fare from 5 cents to 7 cents, and he said that was an outrage, and he refused to ride the streetcar and filed a lawsuit with a young lawyer to make them put the fare back to 5 cents. And eventually he won that lawsuit, and that helped to launch him on his career to be public service commissioner.
Then in 1928, your dad was elected governor of Louisiana, and you all moved from Shreveport to Baton Rouge. What kind of an adjustment was it, this world of one day being virtually a civilian and the next day being surrounded by bodyguards and state troopers? And what kind of an adjustment was that for a young guy?
from my point of view, it's just that you had to make all new friends. You had to meet other people and had to try to break into the different social circles, meet other people. One problem for us, too, was that as my father moved up in the world, we were moving away from people who loved him and strongly supported him. The higher up you get in the social strata, the more people that you'd find who didn't agree with him, took a different position. So as you'd move along, you'd find that while you'd been very popular, and he was very popular, and folks were all for you. Let's say when you started out on Laurel Street, you moved up to where you were, let's say, moving with people who go to the country club and all that sort of thing, you'd find those folks didn't particularly like you. They were on the other side.
Well, that's so interesting. Did your dad, being in politics and being gone a lot, because politics is that kind of a trade, that kind of an art, did you ever wish he had gone into something else, maybe be a baker or a plumber or a policeman? In other words, when you were a kid, did you ever say, gee, I wish he would, because he wasn't like other people's fathers. He was on the road asking people to vote for him.
Well, I didn't. I thought that he was doing great things for the people, great things for people who needed someone on their side, folks who had very little hope in life otherwise. And I felt that he was doing good things for the country, and eventually he'd do great things for the whole world if we're made to live. As a youngster, when I came to understand who he was and what he was, my ambition was to be the son of the President of the United States. I thought someday he'd be President of the United States.
Senator, we're going to tell our fellow LSU alumni a dark secret. You once considered going to Princeton University, and I think your father said he was for LSU. Is that correct?
It worked out more like this. My mother wanted my brother to go to Chimney Rock Camp, boys' camp in the summertime, because she felt Palmer needed some discipline, and she thought a boys' camp would do him some good. So to get Palmer up there, she persuaded me that I had to go. It wasn't exactly persuaded. I was told I was to go. Then Palmer ducked out on it, didn't go, so I wound up there. And those people up there were associated. Some of the people recommended that these youngsters would go to either Lawrenceville Academy, which would be a preparatory to Princeton, or else they would enter directly into Princeton. So those people up there sold me the idea that Princeton was something terrific, one of the best in the country and all that. And those people got me interested in Princeton. When I mentioned to my father, he was just floored. He said, how could this be? I worked so hard to build a university that everybody could be proud to send their sons to. It's not good enough for my own son. Well, he was assassinated shortly after that, and so as far as I was concerned, I had no interest in going to Princeton after that. And frankly, from my point of view, I'm very fortunate I didn't go to Princeton, because I met a great number of young men and women who I've seen throughout life, and it was a great asset to meet all these young people who, many of whom started out with nothing, just like my father did. Some came to LSU with no more than a change of underwear, if they had that, and worked to make outstanding citizens of themselves.
Senator, it was 1935. You were 16, and the message flashed that shocked not only the nation but the world, because by then he was a world-renowned man, that your father had been shot at the state capitol. What kind of day was that for Russell Long? How did you hear that it had happened?
Well, it started out just an ordinary day. I was at our home in New Orleans with my mother. We were living in New Orleans at that time. My father would be there when the Senate was not in session. And a call came that Sunday afternoon from an uncle at Baton Rouge who called to tell me that my father had been shot. So I got my mother and my sister and brother together, and we drove the automobile up from New Orleans. I drove it to get them up here as soon as we could.
Did y'all know how serious it was?
Well, obviously it was a serious matter. I mean, we knew that.
Yes.
We were not anticipating he would die at that point.
Senator, how does assassination, the political assassination of a parent, affect a young person? How has that fact, that act of horror, how has that influenced or molded you? Just that.
Well, it's hard for anybody to take, but it was a matter of great good fortune to me that I had been reading some books by an author named Lloyd C. Douglas at that time. One of them was a book from which a popular movie was made, Magnificent Obsession.
Yes.
Another was a book named Forgive Us Our Trespasses. And the writings of that fellow made a tremendous impact on me. The latter book, Forgive Us Our Trespasses, just as good Lord would have it, is something I've been reading just before my father's death, and that convinced me that when people do unkind things to you, they don't do it because they have something in for you or because they hate you. They do it either because they're misguided or because they want something for themselves that is perhaps something that they wrongfully want for themselves, but you ought to feel sorry for them because they're misguided rather than hate people because they do those kind of things, and you ought to try to help them rather than hurt them. That philosophy, I guess, prevented me from being an embittered person, caused me to feel kindly toward people on the theory that they didn't know any better.
Did you get to have the opportunity to discuss that phenomena, that having a loved one killed, with any of the Kennedys after they suffered a similar tragedy?
No, I wasn't really that close to the Kennedy family. I guess I was a lot closer to John Kennedy than I was to any member of the Kennedy family. Just didn't know them that well.
I think that Huey Long's dying words are astonishing. I think they say more about the man. According to the biography, he said, this is Huey Long, "God, don't let me die. I have so much to do." Now, that's according to the biography. Those were his final words. That's like handing a son a torch, a daughter or son. That's a monumental statement of purpose and attempting to give meaning to life. That had to have some effect on you.
Well, of course it did. I had not been sure I wanted to be a politician at that time. As I say, my thought was that I was going to support my father, do what I could to help him. In a family where one parent is as dominant as it was in Huey's family, it tends to make children recessive, and that tended to have the effect on me. I stammered quite a bit back at that time, and I think that was partly because of the dominant effect of my father being around him. And oddly enough, after his death, I felt that I should go into public affairs, should get involved in politics. And one reason I felt that way was that when he was working, I thought, to do good things for the people. I felt that there's so many people who in politics and in government who really did not share those kind of objectives, who just entered what they could get out of it for themselves. And I felt that we needed good people in government, and that if I went into it, maybe I could help to make up in some respects of what had been lost with my father's assassination. Of course, I never judged myself as being another Huey Long. That's one thing I think I had to learn, but likewise, I thought people ought to learn that I wasn't Huey Long, I was Russell Long.
What were the major differences in you and Huey Long? A different vision of life?
Oh, goodness knows, but while I heard his speeches and was impressed by what he had to say and generally agreed with what he had to say, tended to idolize him. I didn't come from the same background, you might say. For instance, he started out as a son of a farmer.
Yes, sir.
He ran away from home when he was young, and he wasn't happy at home, came back, and later on ran away again and that type thing. I had a successful father. We had a good home. We had everything going for us. And so in many respects, as a matter of things being made easy for me, I had to push myself to realize that these young people I'm going to be taking on from time to time, I'd run from someone or against someone who came from a background similar to my father's. I had to realize that this fellow has been conditioned more than I have, because he's had a lot more tough knocks to contend with getting to where he is right now. So it'd be almost like preparing for boxing match, you'd better be at your best because that guy's going to be tough.
You mentioned that you had a stammer, a little speech impediment, and you overcame it. And just to let your fellow Louisianians know to what extent you overcame it, very recently the public broadcast system ran a survey on who was the best debater in the United States Senate, and that's got to be 100 debaters. And of course, Senator Long was named the best debater in the United States Senate. How did you overcome that stammer, that impediment?
Well, part of it, I think, was just psychological. And when I was on my own, it didn't work out that way. Now, I still have something of a speech impediment you'll detect from time to time. I'll stammer over a word, the keys, or something like that. But the first time I got to make a speech in front of an audience, it just didn't occur.
Isn't that interesting?
I didn't speak the same way I did in conversation.
Senator, LSU campus politics, you were very involved. You ran for president of the student body, won big. And it's rather interesting that you told me about your father and the bus line, because in your platform when you ran for president of the student body was better bus service and a cooperative laundry. Of course, you won, and you won big. Did you enjoy that race?
No, it's a rough race. I lost a lot of weight. I must have lost 20 pounds in that campaign. I guess I weighed about 142 when it started, about 122 when it got through, because I had not learned at that point how to adjust my eating to where I'd stay so much on edge and under such tension that I couldn't eat more than a half sandwich at one time. Just lost a lot of weight in it. Looking back on it, it might have been some fun, but it wasn't at that time.
Senator, in 1939, the Louisiana scandals broke, and the then governor was involved, the president of LSU was involved. How did that hit you when that broke? Did it ever make you doubt that you should participate in this business, this political game?
Well, it caused me to have some second thoughts, but after I thought it over, it tended to confirm my thought about matters. That feeling as I did that we had too many people in politics who are out for something for themselves, not enough who are out for what they can do for the people and do for the country. I feel then, felt then, just I feel now, we need more dedicated people in government. And all that did was tend to confirm what I had in mind, that the kind of thing that Huey Long was trying to do was more or less left in the hands of people who I don't say were unworthy. It's just that they didn't share the same high objectives that he had. You had some people then who, in those situations, who were out for themselves. Now, to be fair about it, those scandals were very much overblown.
Yes, sir.
And I'm not here to criticize the media about this thing. That sells newspapers. When somebody's indicted, it's headlines and all that sort of thing, and the public is quick to think that somebody's guilty before you hear that poor fellow's side of the story and all that. I can think of some people who were convicted who today could not have been convicted in calmer times. There's some people down there who I knew. Seymour Weiss was one of them, and I've always had a high opinion of Mr. Weiss. He and those people were associated with him in buying a hotel. They later sold the hotel. As I recall, they didn't sell the, well, I believe they did sell the hotel to the state for a nursing facility to train nurses. They subsequently sold the furniture, having sold the hotel. And those men were sent to jail on that. Well, I've thought about it subsequently many times, and you know, under Louisiana law, when you sell a house or a building, that doesn't include the furniture unless you specifically say it includes the furniture. And I think in calmer times, they would have never convicted those people. But back at that time, the public had the idea that these people had done a lot of mischief and done a lot of wrong, and some people clearly had. So that, what, for example, I knew James Monroe Smith real well. When our family moved from Baton Rouge to New Orleans,
I was president of LSU, right?
James Monroe Smith was president of LSU, and I had been elected, or I was elected about that time, president of my little high school class out at University High. And I wanted to continue to go to school there. I thought I'd start on my career, you might say. I was president of the freshman class at the University High School. So they left me here, and Dr. Smith took me in his home, and I lived with those people. And he was a kind gentleman, and I think how sad all that was. I feel that he perhaps embezzled that money, hoping to pay it back. Yeah, he was going to play the stock market, you know. He guessed correctly that there was going to be a war in Europe, and the price of wheat was going to skyrocket. Unfortunately for that poor fella, his time was off. But he told his son-in-law, who's dead now, not here to speak for him, that he really had hoped that he could use that money to have a fund to help young children go to school and things like that. And hard though it may be to believe it, it's not too hard for me to believe it, because I know that many times he dug in his own pocket to give students who were down and out money so they could continue to go in school. So having known the man, I tend to feel very kindly toward him, and think the best of it may be that he wanted his daughter to be able to afford a debut down there in New Orleans society and that type of thing, which she came.
You never know about men.
Well, bless her heart, she came back to Baton Rouge, having gone down and married the same boy she'd been going with all the time here in Baton Rouge.
I didn't know that.
You know, so maybe that had something to do with it. But in any event, I felt very sorry for those people, because I thought he was a real sweet, fine, kindly man. But there were people, obviously, who sought a chance to make money and did things that are not right. I thought that it's not fair that the people would keep associating Huey Long with somebody's mischief, where none of that would establish to have been something that started when Huey Long was either governor or United States senator. It came along after his death.
Senator, that LSU Law School, the class of 1942, I'm going to use a cuss word on television. That was a hell of a class, wasn't it?
I think so.
You had United States Judge Alvin Rubin was a member of the class. You had former Governor John McKithen was a member of the class. United States Senator Russell Long was a member of that class. And there were several other men who excelled later on. I don't know if our friends know it, but Senator Long had more than an illustrious name. He graduated third in that class, which was no small accomplishment, because it was filled with heavyweights.
I think I'd had a chance to be valedictorian of that class if Alvin Rubin hadn't been in that class. But, you know, Alvin Rubin tied the all-time record. Paul M. Hebert was the dean of the law school at that time, and only Dean Hebert had made better grades than Alvin Rubin. Well, actually, he made the same grades. They had just the same record. So Alvin tied the record that Paul Hebert had made when he was a student at LSU. And I always gave up any hope of being valedictorian coming down the home stretch, because I saw I'd never catch up on that fellow. He was one law student that just had everything it took to be outstanding. And he's a great judge, in my opinion. He's a great Court of Appeals judge.
Senator, you enlisted in the Navy. You skippered a landing craft. You received several decorations. You participated in the invasions of Sicily, Anzio, and southern France. And you know, now I'm a citizen of Louisiana. I've lived here all my life. We tend not to know those things about you. Isn't that interesting? I think that we, probably because of who you are, that the son of Huey Long, and that last name, we think of you strictly as a political creature, and it doesn't do you justice because there were so many facets to your life beyond the political arena.
Well, to be fair about it, nobody gave me any decorations, Gus. In fact, I came to have sort of a disdain for decorations, because my impression is that a lot of people got decorations because they either had a friend or recommended themselves.
But you participated in those battles.
Oh, yes. I had a chance to be very much in the thick of it. I was on Sicily the first day. And I was at Anzio quite a while we were under shell fire there. And I had the first boat of its size on the beach at South France. But I learned a lot about warfare and saw a lot of it. Fortunately for me, I never had any of my sailors killed. I saw a lot of fighting, but to me it's sort of a Hollywood war. I learned to develop a sort of feeling that none of these things are going to happen to us. It just doesn't happen that way.
Senator, I'm going to have time for only one more question, and I want to explain to our friends that we're going to do two programs with Senator Long, one on his memories of his father and his political years, early years particularly, and then we're going to do next week a program in which I'm going to ask the Senator for his evaluations of some famous people from Uncle Earl all the way down to Ronald Reagan. So you'll really want to be around. And the point that I'd like to leave this program with, it's 1948, and you became the youngest man ever elected to the United States Senate. You beat former Governor Bob Kennan. It was a tough race, about 10,000 votes. Pretty tough race.
It is very close. Frankly, I misjudged that, and I thought I was going to have a bigger margin than that. But the reason I misjudged it was because I was looking at a governor's race where that rural vote gets out to a much larger extent than it does in a senator's race. I lost Baton Rouge, Shreveport, New Orleans, these big cities. I made it back in those small rural boxes, and the vote was lighter in those boxes than anticipated.
Was that your toughest race?
Yes, it was, as far as running for public office
Yes,
is
sir.
concerned.
Yes, sir. Did being this terribly young man in the United States Senate, did that work against you at all? We only have a moment.
Well, people obviously are going to judge you for what you are. When you come there as a youngster, 29 years of age, I was 29 when I took the oath of office, they obviously know that you don't know a great deal, and they're going to have to judge you accordingly.
Of course. Senator, I want to thank you for being with us, and I want to remind our friends that next week Senator Long will be back for another program in which we'll get his evaluations on some people that most of us have just read about. And in the meantime, it's an honor and a pleasure to be with you. You're a very warm human man, and sometimes we're not sure about legends, but you're okay, and nice to be with you, Senator.
Thank you so much, Gus. Many thanks.
Major funding for this production is provided by American Bank of Lafayette, the financial choice of the 80s. Additional funding provided by the Friends of LPB.